Thank you.
And welcome back to another episode of LA Fishguys, this particular one being the Algae Filter episode, and this is part 4. It's been 2 weeks since we installed our Algae Filter, and 1 week since I was here to follow up and make sure it was working properly. So far we've got a tub or a filter box mounted on a stand that's receiving water from the filter down below the aquarium. And in turn, that water that's pumped into that filter box, gravity flows back down a drain line into the filter underneath the aquarium. Our goal is to allow this filter box to become what we'll call an algae filter, a filter box that's full of algae. We're here today, we're going to place a light on top of that filter box. And the whole idea is we're going to grow algae in the filter box that will ultimately compete for the same nutrients that this hair algae you're looking at in the tank is feeding on. So our goal is basically to starve the hair algae in the tank. So here's the filter box as we installed it 2 weeks ago. As you can see, it's a blue simple Rubbermaid type container on a homemade wooden stand that I fit in there. Inside the filter box are 2 pipes, stand pipes we'll call them. One of them is the line coming from the water pump from the filter below, and it percolates up into the tank. The second one was a standpipe that allowed that water to drain back down to the aquarium. So we've gone ahead and serviced the tank this morning, did a 20-gallon water change, vacuumed the gravel to extract some of that debris out of there, and use the rest of the water to try to suck as much of that bad hair algae out as possible. Now that I've got the tank serviced, it's time to work on the algae filter itself. The things that I need to do this morning are put a valve on the discharge side of that submersible water pump. The flow, I think, in this algae filter is a little too strong. I also have some strainers I want to put on the standpipe end, which is how the water exits that container, just to minimize the amount of algae pieces that might fall out of there. Because ironically, I've done this in the past, and even though I did resolve the hair algae problem, it was the algae that I was using to compete with the hair algae that ended up moving into the tank and taking over. So again, I'm going to put a valve on here, I'm going to put a strainer on there, and then we need to take the lid and cut it open so we can put that large light on top of it. To pump the water up to our algae filter, we've selected a submersible type water pump. It comes with a few additional fittings, one of which is a restrictor or a valve, and that slips onto the end of it. So we've got the pump here, and we put this valve on there that we can restrict the flow. The pump itself will allow us to slip some flexible 3/4 inch tubing over the discharge nozzle, and we'll secure it with one of those plastic snap clamps. After we've placed the pump down in the reservoir below, we've already snaked the tubing up through the hole in the side of the cabinet, and that'll reach up and slip onto a hose barb fitting on the underside of our tank, our algae filter tank that is. And you can see now that we've put the valve in there, it's not as forceful, and we're not overwhelming the 1-inch standpipe. So now we're going to go take and cut a hole in that lid. So we purchased a 65-watt, kind of like a security type lamp. Has kind of a NEMA or waterproofed enclosure, and we'll cut the hole to match this lid here. And what ultimately goes inside there
is like a power compact bulb, but it has a screw end in there, and so it'll screw right into this fixture here. So there'll be 65 watts, and this particular one is a 6500 Kelvin, so it's a color range that's beneficial as far as encouraging the growth of plants, in this case the new algae, the chaeto, that we're going to put in there. So I want to take the cover for this, use it as a template to cut the hole in the top lid of the algae filter.
And I did come prepared this morning. Not only do I have a pen that allows me to trace or mark the opening that we want to cut out, but I also brought along a utility blade, a brand new sharp one, so I can probably cut my finger off easier. Having marked the area that the lens itself for the light will insert into, we'll carefully use that utility blade and cut the opening out of the top of this plastic lid. With just a few carefully placed grooves or cut marks, we can easily push the open or the cut piece out of the opening. Again, this is the area that the light is going to sit onto and insert into as it sits on top of the algae filter itself.
And so what we have is this, and then the lid will just sit right down inside there. That'll help secure it.
Now, before I get myself too involved in the lighting aspects of the algae filter, there's two things I need to take care of first. One is that strainer that I want to put on the standpipe drain side of the algae filter. The other is just a short little elbow on the discharge side where the water's being pumped into it. I figure instead of it billowing upwards, if I directed it to the side, it would create more of a circulation, thorough circulation, throughout the whole algae filter. And so there's my two additional items. Again, not only just one strainer, but a double strainer, because I don't want one side to get plugged up and block all the flow. This way it acts as a bypass. And now with the plumbing items modified, we can take that lid that we've cut the hole out of and secure it on top of the rubber tub. It will help make it structurally sound, and again, serves as a place to set the light hood itself. And now here's the lens for the light hood, and you can see how it neatly and securely fits into that opening on top of the tank. We'll now take the lens back off and we'll begin to assemble the actual lighting system itself. And that lighting system consists of the fixture portion with the clear lens that the two will clamshell over this power compact style screw-in fluorescent bulb. All the wiring we have to do is just creating or adding on to it the pigtail power supply cord. And with the light fixture assembled, we're now going to take the chaeto algae, which is a macroalgae, meaning a large algae, like Caulerpa itself used to be. In this particular case, we're going to use this chaeto and we're going to put it inside of our plastic algae filter, the one that we're going to put the light on top of. Again, the idea is to try to get this algae here to grow, and as it grows, it will suck up nutrients from the water, just like the hair algae does, and hopefully the chaeto will begin to outcompete the hair algae for whatever nutrients it's feeding on, and ultimately starve out the hair algae. Now keep in mind, just allowing the algae to grow is not enough. The whole idea is that the algae, as it grows, absorbs those nutrients. You then need to physically harvest or trim out some of the algae, and at that point, you are actually physically removing nitrates from the system. If we were to allow the algae to remain in the system, and let's just say it begins to die out, it's just going to release that right back into the system. So you've now become what I'll call an algae farmer. Your goal is to grow algae and harvest it. The trick is to figure out what to use the algae that you've removed from the tank for. And now that we've got the algae in the algae filter, it's time to place the light on top of the tank and get it wired up so that it comes on. We're going to use a timer to control when it comes on. Now here, follow me carefully on this. Since there's algae growing in the tank, algae, like any plant, consume carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. That's why you'll see those little bubbles occasionally rising up from the algae growing in the tank. Keep in mind that as the light comes on and the light goes off and that photosynthesis process works, again, those algae will begin to consume carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. But when the light is off, the algae do just the opposite. They consume oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. What you may not be aware of is that as carbon dioxide enters the aquarium water, it pulls the pH down. So in a 24-hour period, if you were to monitor the pH of the water in your aquarium, as the lights come on, you would begin to see the pH rise. As the lights go off, you'll begin to see the pH drop. And so in this particular situation, one of the benefits of the algae filter is it will allow us to help correct, or should I say, stabilize that pH balance. In other words, during the day when the lights are on in the aquarium, the algae in the aquarium are producing oxygen and consuming carbon dioxide. The pH is rising. At nighttime, to prevent the pH from fluctuating, we're going to set up our algae filter on a timer so that the light in the algae filter is actually the opposite or out of phase with the aquarium itself. So when the lights go off in the aquarium, the lights in the algae filter are on. This will help the algae in the algae filter consume carbon dioxide and continue to give off oxygen. This should help stabilize or balance over a 24-hour period the pH of the water in the aquarium. So there's an additional benefit from this type of a filter. And with the flip of the switch on our timer, the light in the algae filter comes on and our system actually comes alive. Make it a point to come on back for part 5, our first visit after 2 weeks. Will the hair algae be gone?